At my 70th birthday party, I heard my son tell his friend as calm as a man ordering coffee, "My dad is nothing but a burden. I just wish he were dead already." The glass trembled in my hand, but I didn't cry. I had no tears left. For decades, I carried this family alone, working double shifts, paying debts, raising 2 children after their mother's sudden death. I gave my life so they could stand. So how did I end up here? Celebrated with candles and cake, yet quietly erased in my own son's heart. What does a father do when sacrifice turns into scorn? Stay with me, because the choice I made after that night was unlike anything my family ever expected. My name is Edward Hartman, and on that night, I turned 70. People told me I should feel proud that a house full of friends and relatives was proof of a life well lived. But standing in that kitchen with balloons sagging and candles melting down, pride was the last thing I felt. I've been a widower for more than 30 years. My wife Clara died in a construction accident when Michael was only 6. Claire, my daughter, was 8. Overnight, I became mother, father, provider, protector. There was no one else. I worked as a nurse at Stanford Hospital. Long nights on my feet, 12-hour shifts that bled into overtime. I stitched together a life from exhaustion and determination. I'd come home with aching legs, but I still packed lunches, ironed clothes, and left little notes in backpacks so my children would never feel abandoned. Claire grew up to be everything I prayed for. She studied hard, built a career, and married a good man. They moved far away, but she never forgot me. Packages showed up at my door. Sweaters she thought I'd like. Books, she said, reminded her of us. She called often, and when her daughters, my granddaughters, Lily and Sophie, were old enough to talk, they filled the phone with songs, giggles, and handmade cards. Their love was distant, but it was steady. Michael stayed close, too close. At 40, he still lived under my roof. Jobs slipped through his hands. Debt piled up. I paid what I could with my pension, even borrowed quietly from friends. I told myself it was temporary, that he just needed time. But time turned into decades, and instead of gratitude, he gave me contempt. He mocked my cooking. Cheap food again. He sneered at my clothes. "You look like a beggar." When I couldn't hand him money, he slammed doors. And yet, he was my son. So I swallowed it, told myself, fathers endure. So on my 70th birthday, surrounded by smiling faces, I stood with a knife poised over a cake frosted in roses. They sang happy birthday and cheered when I blew out the candles. But minutes before, my son had wished me dead. Later that night, when the guests were gone and the lights dimmed, I sat alone in my kitchen. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. Balloons sagged toward the floor. Gift bags sat unopened on the counter. I stared at the empty plates, and Michael's words echoed in my skull. This wasn't the first time he'd hurt me, but tonight, something inside me broke for good. The phone call that changed our lives came on a Tuesday, the kind of ordinary day that never warns you it's about to break. I was folding towels when a voice from the site manager's office asked if I was Mr. Hartman. He said there had been an accident. He said, Clara didn't suffer. He said a lot of things that didn't reach me, because the only thing I could hear was Claire asking what was wrong, and Michael standing barefoot on the tile clutching his toy truck, waiting for me to explain why his mother wasn't coming home. After the funeral, I found a list in Clara's handwriting taped inside a kitchen cabinet. Light bulbs, oil change, school picture money. It ended mid-line. I kept the paper folded small. That night I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and said, "Okay, Eddie, you're both parents now." Then I set the alarm for 4:45 a.m. Those first years were a braid of grief and logistics. I worked days when I could, nights when I had to, any shifts the hospital needed. 12 hours on the floor meant 12 hours of small kindnesses for strangers, cooling cloths, steady hands for IVs, and a voice that didn't shake when families needed news. I learned the smell of antiseptic that clung to my hair, and the way fatigue can hum like electricity in your bones. On the way home, I'd stop at the discount grocer and count coupons like prayers. Every morning before school, I packed the same brown paper bags, half a peanut butter sandwich, an apple if I could afford fresh, a handful of pretzels, sometimes a square of chocolate wrapped in foil. I tucked a note under the napkin, just a line or two. Proud of you. Be brave today. Mom loved your laugh. When Claire started keeping her notes in a shoebox, Michael crumpled his into rockets and shot them at the bus stop. Boys. I told myself that meant he was fine. Claire was a watcher. She learned to tie her shoes by watching me tie Michael's. She learned to cook by watching me stretch a pound of ground beef into 3 dinners. By middle school, she was checking the stove, reminding me to restock milk, helping me press shirts Sunday night. So Monday mornings didn't start as a race. She was responsible in the way eldest daughters often become, as if love were a checklist you did with competence. She got a scholarship, cried the night the letter came, and promised she'd still call every week when she left for college. She did. She kept every promise she ever made me. Michael was sunshine or storm, with no weather in between. He wanted the newest sneakers when we could afford only the off-brand. He told me other kids' dads let them go to the lake, so why wouldn't I? He hated that our car squeaked when we turned right. He hated that I wore the same navy scrubs on double shifts. When teachers called about missing homework, I told myself, boys bloom late. When he forgot my birthday in 9th grade and said, "Oh, I thought that was next week," I told myself that teenage brains are foggy. Fathers become fluent in excuses. I tried the things the books recommend: steady rules, second chances, consequences that fit. I praised what deserved praise. I went to the parent meetings and the counselor's office and the Saturday workshop on raising resilient kids, where the handout had a clip art lighthouse on the cover. Michael promised to try. Sometimes he did. He'd have one good week, help with the trash cans, crack a joke that made me laugh out loud, kiss my cheek before bed, and I'd think, there, see, we're turning a corner. Then he'd skip class or blow allowance money and tell me I was overreacting. He could be so charming when he needed something and so cold when he didn't. Money was the part I didn't discuss, not even with Claire. When the first collection letter came for a dumb mistake, a ticket unpaid, a fee that doubled, I covered it. When the second and third arrived with bigger numbers and red stamps, I dipped into savings I'd been tucking away in a coffee tin behind the flour. Just until he finds his footing, I told myself. Later, when he was 22, and a job fell through and a friend forgot to pay him back, I used the credit card I kept for emergencies. The card company called me by my first name, so friendly, as if they knew we were all in this together. Claire married the year Michael turned 25. The ceremony was small, beautiful, and humble. In that way, the most beautiful things are. I gave a toast that made people dab their eyes. When she moved 3 hours away for her husband's residency, I drove the first weekend and the second, and then as often as my shifts allowed. She called every Thursday night without fail, the handset warm against my ear, while I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and the stack of bills. When Lily was born, then Sophie, the calendar acquired new holidays. First steps, first words, First wobbly letters mailed to Grandpa Eddie with too many stamps. The girls held up their drawings on FaceTime, stick figures with bright hair and hearts the size of their heads. "You're our treasure, Grandpa," Lily would squeal, and Sophie would nod like a tiny judge. Some nights their love felt like a porch light left on, guiding me home. Meanwhile, Michael floated from job to job, from couch to couch when he got bored, living alone, and eventually back to my spare room because it just makes sense, Dad. We can help each other out. I heard the contempt in his voice when he said "we," like partnership meant my wallet and his plans. Still, if he texted car trouble, "Any chance you can spot me?" I found a way. If he said, "Everyone else's parents help, why won't you?" I looked at the coffee tin and at the clock and at the worn spot on the rug where Clara used to stand while I stirred the soup, and I helped. Hope is a stubborn thing. It survives on crumbs. It tells you that one good week means a good year is possible. It asks you to remember the boy who fell asleep on your shoulder after the first day of kindergarten, not the man who sneers at your shoes. It bargains. Maybe if I phrase it differently, maybe if I don't nag, maybe if I say nothing at all. I clung to tiny hopes because tiny hopes were easier to carry than the truth. The truth still had bright places. Claire made sure of that. She sent photos of the girls in Halloween capes. Lily as a lopsided cat. Sophie as a pumpkin with cheeks like apples. On Sundays, the girls would visit my kitchen through the screen, counting cookies as I slid trays into the oven. "Save us too," they'd shout, as if distance didn't exist. When the package arrived 3 days later, I always tucked in a note. "Be brave today. Grandpa loves you more than the sky." They kept the notes, Claire told me, in a shoebox under their bunk bed. I pictured that box when the house felt too quiet. Sometimes Michael would wander in during those calls, give a little wave, perform a quick smile that fooled no one, then retreat to his room. He wasn't cruel every day. He could be funny, helpful for an hour, even tender in some sideways way. A repaired hinge on a cabinet door, a cup of coffee left on the counter. Those were the crumbs of hope collected. I brushed them into a pile and said, "He'll mature someday. Men do. He just needs time." I believed that for years. I believed it on the good days because I wanted to. I believed it on the bad days because the alternative was a kind of grief I wasn't yet ready to feel. I told myself a father's job is to keep believing until belief becomes reality. It took my 70th birthday to teach me that belief can also become a blindfold. I used to think money was just numbers on paper. Add here, subtract there, balance it if you can. But when the numbers are for your child, they turn into something else entirely. They become guilt, shame, and obligation. And for me, they became chains. Michael's debts started small. A parking ticket he forgot to pay, a bounced check because he miscalculated, a cell phone bill that doubled with late fees. Each time I covered it, I told myself it was just bad luck, just a rough patch. Then came the credit card debt, the car loan he never kept up with, and the rent arrears when he tried living with a roommate. Every time he knocked on my bedroom door at midnight with that guilty look, I reached for my purse or the little coffee tin where I stashed bills. When the tin ran dry, I used my pension. When that wasn't enough, I borrowed quietly from church friends or neighbors, always promising it was for a home repair or a medical copay. I never admitted the truth, that my 40-year-old son was bleeding me dry. The cruelest part was how quickly he stopped pretending to feel bad about it. At first he'd say, "Thanks, Dad, I'll pay you back." Later it became, I'll get you back when things turn around. And finally, nothing at all. Just an open hand, an expectant stare. I can still hear the sound of his bedroom door slamming when I told him no. The walls shook, the frame rattled, and I sat there in the kitchen with my tea cooling, knowing another fight was coming. He'd stomped down the hall, muttering under his breath about how stingy I was, how other parents helped their kids out without a lecture. But it wasn't just the money. It was everything. I'd cook dinner, meatloaf, roasted chicken, stew that simmered all day. And he'd glance at the plate and sneer, "Cheap food again. Don't you ever get tired of eating like we're broke?" He never noticed that I ate the smaller portions so he could have seconds. He never noticed the hours I spent clipping coupons, stretching every dollar so the fridge wasn't empty. He mocked my clothes, too. "God, Dad, you look like a bagman in those shoes." They were the same shoes I'd worn on double shifts at the hospital. The soles molded to my feet from years of service. To him, they were just ugly. Just another reason to look at me with contempt. I told myself to let it go, that words were just words, but words cut. They slice deeper than unpaid bills. They linger in your bones. The day that broke something inside me was an ordinary Tuesday. Michael came in late, smelling like beer, laughter still clinging to him from wherever he'd been. He tossed his jacket on the chair and leaned against the counter while I scraped leftovers into a container. "You know," he said, "you're nothing like my friend's dad." I didn't look up. "Oh yeah, she bought him a house, a car, helps him out with everything. And you, all you ever do is brag about sacrifice. Sacrifice. This sacrifice, that. What do I have to show for it?" Each word was a blade. I gripped the spoon so hard my knuckles turned white. A house, a car, after decades of 12-hour shifts, after paying off his fines, his credit cards, his failed ventures. Was I supposed to apologize for not handing him the world on a silver platter? I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just packed the food into the fridge and said nothing. He walked away humming as if he'd made a simple observation and not gutted me alive. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, his words echoing louder than the blades. Nothing like my friend's dad. Brag about sacrifice. It was the first time in years I felt not just sadness but anger. A hot, sharp anger that startled me with its clarity. For decades I had told myself he was lost, wounded, still grieving the mother he barely remembered. I had told myself love meant patience, endurance, and forgiveness. But patience had become permission. Endurance had become servitude. Forgiveness had become a leash. Every cruel comment, every slammed door, every unpaid debt. It all replayed in my mind like a ledger. Every line, a reminder of how little he valued me. And for the first time, instead of excusing it, I let myself feel it. Really feel it. I remembered the way he laughed at my cardigan when I showed up to his college concert. How he begged me to stay home because I embarrassed him. I remembered the way he introduced me to no one at his parties, as if I were invisible. I remembered the birthdays he forgot, the Father's Days that passed without a card, the nights he came home late and brushed past me without a word. All of it had been built into a mountain I had carried on my back, bent but unbroken, until now. Lying there in the dark, I realized sadness had kept me silent. But anger, it was different. Anger was a movement. Anger was a fire licking at the chains. Anger whispered, "You don't have to live like this anymore." I turned on the bedside lamp and looked around my room. The photographs on the dresser. The quilt I'd stitched from old shirts. The stacks of unopened letters from the bank. This house had been my fortress, my coffin, my gift to him someday. But what if it didn't have to be his? What if it could still be mine? I pressed my palms together, trembling, not with weakness, but with resolve. Michael thought I was a burden, thought my life had no weight. He had no idea how heavy I could be when I finally decided to stand. For the first time in years, I wasn't just tired, I was furious. And fury, I discovered, can be a kind of freedom. The morning after my birthday, I stood at the kitchen sink, staring at the balloons slumped on the floor, their shine already dull. My coffee went cold in my hands. Michael was still asleep in his room, the muffled sound of his snoring carrying down the hall. He didn't know that his words from the night before were still echoing in my chest, sharp as broken glass. I set the mug down and reached for the phone. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from the decision. Richard Cole Realty Group, a cheerful voice answered. "Richard, this is Edward Hartman," I said, my voice flatter than I expected. "I'd like to sell my house." There was a pause. "Mr. Hartman, your place on Willow Lane, are you sure? You've been there for decades." "I've never been more sure," I told him. We arranged to meet the next afternoon. I hung up the phone and stood in the silence of my kitchen. For the first time in years, I felt something shifting inside me. Not guilt, not grief, but resolve. Richard was polite, professional, but his eyes softened when he walked through the house. He could tell it held years of memories, family dinners, birthdays, Christmas mornings. He pointed out the updates I'd made over time, the garden I'd tended, the hardwood floors I'd polished until they gleamed. "Edward, this place will go quickly," he assured me. "I don't want it to go quickly," I said. "I want it to go quietly. No open houses, no signs out front. Just one buyer, someone who will take it as is." He nodded slowly. "I know just the kind of investor who would be interested." When I signed the first stack of documents, my hand was steady. Each stroke of the pen felt like slicing through old ropes that had bound me for too long. The house wasn't just a building. It was the prison I had built with sacrifice and silence. And now, with every signature, I was cutting myself free. One evening, as I sealed another box, I thought back to that moment at my birthday party. The cake, the candles, the chorus of voices singing "Happy Birthday," while Michael stood outside wishing me gone. For decades I had believed that love meant enduring, that a father's worth was measured by how much he could carry. But now I understand love without respect is poison. It seeps into your bones, hollows you out until you forget who you are. And I was done drinking it. The night before closing, I walked through the house one last time. Room by room, I whispered, "Goodbye." Not to the walls, but to the man who had lived here, the one who had bent until he almost broke. In the kitchen, I laid my palm against the counter, the place I had sat down, countless grocery bags sorted, bills rolled out, dough for pies no one thanked me for. "It's over," I told myself, and in that moment, I believed it. The next morning, I signed the final papers with Richard. He slid the envelope across the table, and when I picked up the pen, my hand trembled. Not with fear, but with release. "Congratulations, Edward," Richard said gently. "It's a big step." "It's the first step," I corrected him. Because for the first time in decades, I wasn't moving for Michael. I wasn't moving for obligation or guilt. I was moving for myself. And as I left the office, sunlight spilling across the sidewalk, my phone buzzed. Claire's message lit up the screen. "The girls are making you a welcome banner. Hurry home, Dad." I smiled, For once, the word home didn't mean the house on Willow Lane. It meant love. It meant freedom. It meant me. Michael found out 3 days after closing. I was at Claire's when the phone started buzzing, call after call from his number, each one angrier than the last. I didn't answer. Then came the messages, sharp as knives. What did you do? Where's the house? Why didn't you tell me? Richard must have left him a courtesy voicemail confirming the sale. I imagined Michael standing in the kitchen, staring at empty drawers, realizing the closets were bare. For once, he couldn't slam a door hard enough to change reality. The next morning, Jason, the same friend who had heard Michael's birthday confession, called me quietly. He's losing it, Mr. Hartman. He can't believe you sold it. He keeps saying, you ruined his life. I almost laughed, though there was no humor in it. Ruined his life? No, I had simply stopped letting him ruin mine. The confrontation came a week later. I agreed to meet him on the pier at Half Moon Bay, the place where I'd been walking every morning since moving into my new condo. The ocean air felt clean in my lungs, bracing like truth itself. Michael was already there when I arrived, pacing with his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He looked smaller somehow, his shoulders slumped, his hair unkempt. Rage had drained him. Why would you ruin everything? He shouted the second he saw me. His voice cracked, raw with disbelief. That was our house, Dad. You had no right. I stood firm, the wind whipping my hair across my face. I didn't ruin anything, Michael. You did. He froze. That house was never a prize waiting for you. It was the roof over our heads, built from my sweat and sacrifice. You treated me like a burden, wished me gone, and now I am gone, from the house and from the life you thought you controlled. His face crumpled. No, you don't understand. I was angry. I didn't mean it. I shook my head. You said it calmly. You meant every word in that moment, and even if you regret it now, regret doesn't erase years of contempt. Michael stepped closer, desperation in his eyes. Please, Dad, don't do this. I can change. I'll get a job. I'll pay you back. Just undo this. Please undo what? My freedom? I asked, my voice steady. You want me to step back into the prison I built for myself, just so you don't have to face the truth? No, Michael. Not anymore. He dropped his head into his hands, shoulders shaking. I've got nothing without that house. Nothing. I felt a stab of sorrow. It's hard to watch your child broken, even when they brought it on themselves. But I refused to bend. That's the lesson, Michael. Nothing is exactly what you left me with. No respect, no gratitude, just silence and scorn. And now you get to live with what you gave. For years, I had been the one to cry while he stood stone-faced. Now the roles were reversed. He begged, pleaded, reached for me like a drowning man clawing at the shore. But I knew if I pulled him back, he'd only drag me under again. I still love you, I said softly. I always will, but love without respect is poison, and I won't drink it anymore. His sobs carried on the wind as I turned and walked away. Each step on the wooden planks of the pier felt heavier than stone, yet lighter than air. I didn't look back. The condo I bought near Clare wasn't much, just one bedroom, creaky floors, and an outdated kitchen. But when I opened the balcony door, the ocean stretched wide, waves crashing steadily and unbothered. For the first time in decades, I felt like the space I lived in actually belonged to me. Not to memories, not to sacrifices, not to Michael's endless demands. Just me. Claire came over the first weekend with Lily and Sophie. They barreled into my arms, shrieking, "Grandpa!" as if I'd been gone a lifetime. We walked hand in hand down the boardwalk, their hair flying in the salty breeze, their laughter ringing out like bells. That night, as we baked cookies in my little kitchen, Sophie tugged my sleeve. "Grandpa, are you happy now?" I bent down, kissed her forehead. "Yes, sweetheart, I finally am." Later, alone on the balcony with a cup of tea, I let the truth settle into me like the tide. For too long, I had mistaken endurance for love, silence for patience, sacrifice for virtue. But endurance had nearly erased me. Silence had made me invisible. Sacrifice had turned into chains. I stared out at the horizon where the sun bled into the sea and whispered the words I wished someone had told me years ago. Love without respect is poison. At 70, I finally chose to live for myself and for those who cherish me. The ocean roared back in answer, and for once I felt heard. I look back now and I realize something I wish I had understood sooner. Love is not proven by how much pain you can endure. Patience is not measured by how much disrespect you can swallow. And sacrifice, if it is taken for granted, turns into chains. For years I believed being a good father meant giving until there was nothing left of me. But all it earned me was silence, scorn, and the slow fading of my own voice. The truth is simple. Love without respect is poison. It does not matter if it comes from a stranger or from your own child. It will hollow you out just the same. At 70, I finally chose to put the cup down. I chose to live, not just survive. If my story struck a chord with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it.